The phone rang at 2:47 in the afternoon. I remember because I was watching the clock, waiting for Diane to call me from Atlanta, like she always did when she traveled for work. 32 years of marriage, and we never went to bed without saying goodnight, even if she was halfway across the country. But when I answered that phone, it wasn't my wife. It was a woman from First National Bank, and her voice had that careful tone people use when they're about to wreck your whole world. She said, "Mr. Raymond Booker, I need you to come to the branch immediately. Your wife is here attempting to withdraw $847,000 from your retirement account. But, sir, she's with a man who's presenting identification, claiming to be you." My blood went cold. I said, "That's impossible. My wife is in Atlanta on a business trip." There was a long pause. Then she said, "Mr. Booker, I don't think she is." If you've ever had the ground disappear beneath your feet while you're standing perfectly still, you know that feeling. Before I tell you what happened when I got to that bank, before I tell you about the man who had my face and the woman I thought I knew, I need you to do something for me. Hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel if you love stories that dig deep into the human heart. And drop a comment telling me what part of the world you're watching from. Because I need to know I'm not alone in this. I need to know somebody out there understands what it feels like to discover that your entire life might be a lie. My name is Raymond Arthur Booker. I'm 73 years old now, but I was 71 when this story began. When my wife of 3 decades walked into a bank with a stranger wearing a mask of my face, trying to steal everything I'd worked for since I was 16 years old. I lived in Greenville, South Carolina at the time, in a modest brick house on Maple Street that I'd bought with my first real paycheck from the textile mill. That house saw my children grow up, saw my grandbabies take their first steps, saw every anniversary dinner and Christmas morning for 30 years. I thought it would see me die, eventually, surrounded by the people I loved. I was wrong about a lot of things. This is the story of how I discovered that the woman sleeping beside me every night had been planning my destruction for longer than I can stand to think about. This is the story of the man who looked like me, who moved like me, talked like me, even had my social security number, and how he almost became me permanently. This is about betrayal so deep it changed the way I see human faces, made me question every smile, every touch, every "I love you" that ever crossed my wife's lips. But it's also about something else, something I didn't expect to find in the wreckage. If you're watching this, and you've ever been lied to by someone you loved, if you've ever wondered how you missed the signs, if you've ever had to rebuild yourself from nothing at an age when you thought the building was done, then you might feel this one. Stay with me. This gets dark before it gets light. I need to take you back 2 years before that phone call, back to when I first started noticing that something in my house wasn't quite right. It was small things at first, the kind of things you tell yourself you're imagining because the alternative is too terrible to consider. Diane started taking her phone into the bathroom when she showered. After 30 years of leaving it on the kitchen counter, suddenly it was glued to her hand. She'd get text messages at odd hours, 3 a.m., 4 a.m., and when I'd stir and ask who was texting so late, she'd say it was her sister Linda having insomnia again. Linda lived in Tampa and had always been a night owl, so it seemed reasonable. Everything seemed reasonable if you didn't look too close. That's the thing about betrayal. It depends on your willingness to believe the story you're being told. And I believed, because what's a marriage without trust? What's love without faith? I'm a simple man. I spent 47 years working at Riverside Textile Mill, operating the same machines until my hands knew every vibration, every sound, every smell of hot cotton and machine oil. I believed in straightforward things, an honest day's work, treating people right, keeping your promises. I believed in Diane. We met at Calvary Baptist Church in 1991. I was 40 years old, divorced 3 years from a marriage that died of indifference, and I'd just started attending services again, because my mama said a man without faith is like a ship without a rudder. She was right about most things, my mama. Diane was in the choir, and Lord, when that woman sang, "His eye is on the sparrow," it was like the Holy Spirit came down and sat in the pews beside us. She had a voice that could make you believe in redemption. She was 38, never married, working as an administrative assistant at Greenville Memorial Hospital. She said she'd been waiting for the right man, someone who'd appreciate her, treat her like the queen she deserved to be. I thought I'd won the lottery. She was beautiful, copper skin, eyes that seemed to hold mysteries, a smile that made me feel like I was the only man in the world. We got married 6 months later, in that same church, with my mama crying happy tears in the front row, and Diane's sister Linda flying in from Florida to be her maid of honor. I thought I knew everything about her. I knew she liked her coffee with 2 sugars and a splash of cream. I knew she'd read the same romance novel 3 times if she loved it enough. I knew she wanted children, but couldn't have them. Something about scarring from an earlier surgery she didn't like to talk about. I thought I knew her heart. But looking back now, I wonder if I ever knew anything at all. The first real crack appeared about 18 months before the bank incident. We were having dinner. I'd made my mama's meatloaf recipe, the ones Diane always said she loved, and I mentioned that my buddy Marcus from the mill had died suddenly of a heart attack. Marcus was only 68, seemed healthy as a horse. Then boom, gone in his sleep. It shook me, made me think about mortality, about what happens to the people we leave behind. I said to Diane, "Baby, we need to make sure all our paperwork is in order. Powers of attorney, wills, all that. Marcus's wife can't even access their bank accounts right now because he never put her name on them properly." Diane got this look on her face, just for a second, like a door opening and closing real quick in a dark hallway. Then she smiled and said, "Of course, honey, we should definitely take care of that." 2 weeks later, she came home with forms from her lawyer friend, Bernard Pickens. She said Bernard had drawn up everything we needed: joint accounts, medical directives, financial powers of attorney. All I had to do was sign. And like a fool, I signed. I signed because she was my wife. I signed because I trusted her. I signed my life away in blue ink on a Tuesday afternoon while Diane made sweet tea and hummed hymns from church. I didn't read the fine print. I didn't ask questions. I just believed in the woman I loved. That was my first mistake. But it wouldn't be my last. The strange thing is, I had a dream that night after I signed those papers. I dreamed I was standing in our bedroom, but it wasn't quite our bedroom. The walls were slightly the wrong color, the windows in the wrong places. And standing in front of the mirror was a man who looked like me. Same height, same build, same gray hair and weathered hands, but when he turned around, his face was wrong. It was like someone had taken a photograph of me and stretched it just slightly, distorted it in ways that made my stomach turn. In the dream, Diane was standing next to him, holding his hand. And when I tried to speak, to ask what was happening, who this imposter was, no sound came out. They just looked at me and smiled, and then I woke up sweating, my heart hammering in my chest. Diane was asleep beside me, her breathing soft and even. I told myself it was just anxiety, about getting older, about mortality, about nothing. But I can still see that man's face sometimes, when I close my eyes, and now I know. That wasn't a dream. That was a warning. My subconscious mind was screaming at me about something my conscious mind refused to see. 'Cause that man in the mirror, he was real. He was walking around with my identity, my social security number, my entire life in his pocket. And the woman sleeping peacefully beside me knew exactly where he was and what he was doing. She'd known all along. 3 months after I signed those papers, Diane got a new job. Or at least, that's what she told me. She said she was leaving the hospital to work for a consulting firm called Sterling Solutions Group, doing administrative work for their Atlanta branch. The pay was better, she said, but it required travel, 3 or 4 days a month, sometimes more. She'd stay in corporate housing, take care of business, come home with stories about hotel breakfasts and boring meetings. It seemed legitimate. She showed me business cards, email correspondence, even a photo of her new office. I remember standing in our kitchen, looking at that photo on her phone. A sterile corporate space with a desk and a plant, and feeling nothing but pride. My wife was moving up in the world. We were going to be comfortable in our retirement. I was happy for her. God help me, I was happy. I didn't know that Sterling Solutions Group didn't exist. I didn't know that the office in the photo belonged to a WeWork space, rented by the hour. I didn't know that while I was home alone, eating reheated leftovers and watching Jeopardy, my wife was 40 miles away, in an apartment in Spartanburg, teaching another man how to be me. His name was Devin Carter, and I eventually learned he was 39 years old, young enough to be my son. He'd done time for identity theft and fraud, got out of prison 2 years before Diane found him. Or maybe he found her. I still don't know exactly how they connected, and part of me doesn't want to know. What I do know is that Devin was good at what he did. He studied people, learned their mannerisms, their speech patterns, their histories, and Diane gave him everything he needed to study me. She took photos of my documents when I wasn't looking, my birth certificate, my social security card, my driver's license, my military discharge papers from my brief stint in the Army back in '72. She recorded conversations we had at dinner, capturing my voice, my accent, the way I pronounced certain words. She fed Devin details about my life, where I grew up in Charleston, the name of my first dog, Rusty, my mama's maiden name, Patterson, the scar on my right knee from when I fell off a roof at age 12. She gave him my entire identity like she was handing over a costume. And Devin wore it well. I found this out much later, of course. But in those early days of Diane's new job, I just noticed the small changes in her behavior. She started dyeing her hair, wearing more makeup, buying clothes that seemed too young for a woman in her late 60s. When I commented on it, told her she looked beautiful, asked if she was trying to impress her new colleagues, she'd laugh and say, "A woman's got to take care of herself, Ray. I'm not dead yet." There was something in the way she said it, like she was emphasizing that last part. I'm not dead yet. At the time, I thought she was just feeling rejuvenated by the job change. Now, I know she was preparing herself for the life she'd have after I was gone. Because that was the plan, you see. I wasn't supposed to survive long enough to make that phone call to the bank. I wasn't supposed to discover Devon. I was supposed to die. Conveniently, quietly, in a way that wouldn't raise too many questions. And then Deanne and Devon would have everything. My pension, my savings, my house, my Social Security benefits. All they needed was me out of the way. And they had a plan for that too. It started with my medication. I have high blood pressure, have had it since my 50s, and I take a pill every morning with my breakfast. Same prescription, same pharmacy, same routine for 20 years. But about 6 months before the bank incident, I started feeling off. Dizzy spells, fatigue. A couple of times, I nearly passed out at the mill. My supervisor, Jerome Washington, pulled me aside one day and said, "Ray, you don't look right. You need to see a doctor?" I told him I'd been taking my medication faithfully, didn't understand what was happening. Jerome insisted I get checked out, so I made an appointment with Dr. Patterson at Greenville Medical. She ran a full blood panel, and you know what she found? My blood pressure wasn't just control, it was dangerously low. She looked at me confused and said, "Mr. Booker, if you've been taking your prescribed dose daily, these numbers don't make sense. Are you sure you haven't been doubling up on your pills by accident?" I was sure. But what I didn't know then was that Diane had been switching my pills. The bottle looked the same. The pills looked the same. But the dosage was wrong. She was giving me twice what I should have taken, trying to kill me slowly enough that it would look like natural causes. A man in his 70s with blood pressure issues has a stroke or a heart attack? Nobody asks questions. Nobody investigates. They just say, "Poor Raymond. At least he went peacefully." And Diane would cry at my funeral, collect my death benefits, and move on with her life. With Devon. But I didn't die. Dr. Patterson changed my prescription, adjusted the dosage, and slowly I started feeling better. I didn't tell Diane about the doctor's concerns. I didn't want her to worry, I thought. How's that for irony? I was protecting her feelings while she was trying to kill me. And when I started improving, when I didn't have the stroke or heart attack she was waiting for, that's when the plan changed. That's when they decided to speed things up. That's when Diane started talking about making sure our financial paperwork was up to date, about meeting with the banker to review our accounts, about how I should stay home and rest while she handled the complicated stuff. She was setting the stage, creating a narrative where Raymond Booker was getting old, getting forgetful, getting unreliable, where it made sense for his younger, more capable wife to take charge, where a man who looked like Raymond Booker could walk into a bank, present identification, and walk out with a fortune. Because why would anyone question it? Why would anyone think the man sitting across from the banker with the right ID, the right signatures, the right answers to security questions was anything other than who he claimed to be? They almost pulled it off. If that bank teller had been less observant, if she hadn't noticed something slightly off about the Raymond Booker sitting in front of her, if she hadn't decided to call the real me just to be sure, I'd be telling you a very different story right now. Or more likely, I wouldn't be telling you any story at all. The call from the bank came on a Thursday afternoon in late September. The weather had just started to turn. That first hint of autumn in the air that makes you think about death and change and time running out. I was sitting in my recliner, half watching a Braves game, when my cell phone rang. Unknown number, which I usually don't answer, but something told me to pick up. Maybe it was God. Maybe it was just dumb luck. Either way, I answered, and my life cracked open like an egg dropped on concrete. The woman on the other end introduced herself as Patricia Simmons, assistant branch manager at First National Bank on Wade Hampton Boulevard. Her voice was professional but tight, like she was trying to stay calm in a situation that wasn't calm at all. She said, "Mr. Booker, I'm calling because we have a situation here that requires your immediate attention. Can you confirm your current location?" I told her I was home. She asked if anyone was with me. I said no, Diane was in Atlanta on business. There was a pause that lasted about 3 seconds but felt like 3 hours. Then she said, "Sir, your wife is here, in the bank, right now. She's attempting to withdraw $847,000 from your joint retirement account. And she's with a man who's presenting himself as Raymond Arthur Booker, complete with driver's license, social security card, and birth certificate. But, sir, something doesn't feel right. Can you come to the branch immediately?" I don't remember getting in my car. I don't remember the drive across town, though it must have taken 20 minutes. What I remember is walking through the glass doors of that bank and seeing Patricia Simmons waiting for me near the entrance, her face pale and serious. She took my arm gently and said, "Mr. Booker, they're in the conference room right now. Before we go back there, I need to confirm. Do you recognize this man?" She showed me a photo on her phone, a driver's license photo. And Jesus Christ, I was looking at my own face. Except it wasn't my face. It was close, damn close. But the eyes were slightly different, the jaw a bit sharper, the nose not quite right. It was like looking at yourself in a carnival mirror, distorted just enough to turn your stomach. I said, "That's not me. I don't know who that is." Patricia nodded, like I'd just confirmed her worst fears. She said, "Sir, he knows everything. Your birth date, your mother's maiden name, where you grew up, the name of your first supervisor at the textile mill. He's been answering every security question correctly. If I hadn't just felt something was wrong." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. We both knew what almost happened, what should have happened, according to Diane's plan. Patricia led me toward the back of the bank, past curious tellers and customers who sensed something dramatic unfolding. We stopped outside a conference room with frosted glass windows. I could see shapes moving inside, 2 figures sitting at a table. Patricia said, "I told them we needed additional verification, that it would just take a few minutes. They're waiting. Are you ready?" Was I ready? No. I wasn't ready to see my wife, of 32 years, sitting next to a stranger wearing my identity like a cheap suit. I wasn't ready to watch my entire life reveal itself as a lie. But ready or not, here it was. Patricia opened the door, and I walked in. Diane saw me first. Her eyes went wide, her mouth opened slightly, and for just a second, just one beautiful, horrible second, I saw pure panic on her face. Then it was gone, replaced by confusion, then shock, then tears. She jumped up and said, "Ray! Oh my God! What are you doing here? I thought you were home. This is my cousin Devin from Atlanta. I told you about him. He's been helping me with—" But I wasn't listening to her words. I was looking at Devin. He was sitting perfectly still, his hands flat on the table, his eyes locked on mine, and he smiled. It was a small smile, almost apologetic, like he was sorry the game was ending, but also impressed that I'd made it this far. He was wearing a shirt similar to ones I owned. He had reading glasses that looked like mine perched on his nose. He'd even cut his hair the same way I wore mine, short on the sides, a little longer on top. He'd become me, or tried to. "Stand up," I said. My voice came out steady, which surprised me because everything inside was shaking. Devin stood slowly. He was about my height, my build. If you saw him from a distance, you might mistake him for me. But up close, with us standing a few feet apart, the differences were obvious. He was younger, smoother, his hands unscarred by 47 years of factory work. But more than that, he was empty. Looking into his eyes was like looking into a mannequin, something shaped like a person, but missing the essential spark of genuine life. Diane was still talking, her voice rising in pitch. "Ray, I can explain. This isn't what it looks like. Devin is family. We were just—" I held up my hand, and she stopped. I looked at Patricia Simmons and said, "Call the police. Right now." Then I looked at my wife, because she was still my wife legally, though not in any way that mattered. And I said, 32 years, Diane. 32 years. And this is who you are." She started to cry. Real tears streaming down her face, her whole body shaking. She said, "Baby, please, let me explain. It's not what you think. I love you. I've always loved you. This was just, we needed money. We were just going to borrow it. We were going to pay it back, I swear to God." But even as she spoke, I could see Devin's hand moving slowly toward the leather bag on the table. I could see him calculating distances, exits, chances. He was going to run. What happened next, I still see in slow motion sometimes. Devin grabbed the bag and lunged toward the door. But Patricia Simmons, God bless Patricia Simmons, had locked it from the outside when we came in. He yanked on the handle, realized he was trapped, and turned back toward us. For a second, I thought he might try to fight his way out. He was younger, stronger, and probably desperate. But then something changed in his face. The mask slipped completely, and I saw who he really was, just a tired con man who'd reached the end of his run. He set the bag down on the table, raised his hands, and said quietly, "It was her idea. All of it. I just want that on record." Diane screamed. Actually screamed. "You lying bastard! You said nobody would get hurt. You said it was foolproof." And there it was. The truth, naked and ugly, standing in the middle of a bank conference room on a Thursday afternoon in September. We stood there in silence for what felt like forever, though it was probably only 2 or 3 minutes, until we heard sirens approaching outside. Diane sank back into her chair, her face in her hands, her whole body shaking with sobs that might have been real, or might have been performance. I couldn't tell anymore. I didn't know this woman. Maybe I never had. Devin just stood there with his hands raised, waiting for what came next. And I I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just a vast empty space where my life used to be. The police arrived. They arrested both of them right there in the bank. Handcuffs, and Miranda rights, and everything you see on TV. Diane kept trying to look at me, kept trying to catch my eye. Like if she could just make me understand, just explain it properly, everything would be okay. But I wouldn't look at her. I kept my eyes on Patricia Simmons, who stood beside me like an anchor, keeping me from floating away into the unreality of it all. As they led Diane toward the door, she finally screamed at me, "I gave you the best years of my life, 32 years. And what did you give me? A house on Maple Street and a husband who smelled like machine oil. I deserved better. I deserved more." I didn't respond. What was there to say? She was right. She probably did deserve better than me. But she didn't deserve my money, my identity, or my life. And she sure as hell didn't deserve my forgiveness. The door closed behind them. The bank became quiet again. Patricia asked if I was okay, if I needed to sit down, if I wanted some water. I told her I just wanted to go home. But here's the thing. I didn't have a home anymore. Not really, because home was supposed to be where the people who love you wait for you at the end of the day. And the person who'd been waiting for me, she wasn't who I thought she was. She never had been. I drove home that evening in a fog, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white. The sun was setting, painting the sky those beautiful oranges and purples that usually make me think about God and grace and the promise of tomorrow. But that evening, it just looked like the world was on fire. I pulled into my driveway, the same driveway I'd pulled into thousands of times, where I'd taught my nephew to ride a bike, where Diane and I had kissed after our wedding reception, where every ordinary moment of my life had happened. And I sat there for 10 minutes, unable to move, because I knew that once I walked through that front door, I'd have to face what my life had become. I'd have to look at the furniture we'd picked out together, the photos on the walls, the coffee mugs in the cabinet, and know that everything was contaminated by lies. That house had been my sanctuary, and now it was a crime scene. Finally, I made myself get out of the car and walk to the door. My hands shook as I put the key in the lock. And that's when I noticed something I'd never noticed before. Scratches around the lock. Little marks that suggested someone had been picking it, practicing, getting in and out when they shouldn't be there. How many times had Devin been in my house? How many times had he walked through my rooms, touched my things, studied my life while I was at work? The thought made my skin crawl. I opened the door and stepped inside. The house was exactly as I'd left it that morning. My coffee mug still in the sink, the newspaper folded on the kitchen table. Everything normal and ordinary and completely wrong. I stood in the living room and just looked around, seeing it all with new eyes. That bookshelf Diane said she bought at an estate sale? Was that true? Or was it a lie, like everything else? The quilt on the back of the sofa that she said her grandmother made? Did she even have a grandmother? Or was that invented too? I realized I didn't actually know anything about Diane's past beyond what she'd told me. I'd met her sister Linda a few times over the years, but Linda lived in Tampa, and they supposedly weren't close. I'd never met her parents. She said they died before we met. Never met childhood friends. Never saw photos from before age 30. She'd appeared in my life fully formed, with no past, no history. Just a beautiful woman, with a beautiful voice, who said she'd been waiting for someone like me. And I'd believed her, because I wanted to believe her. Because believing her meant I wasn't alone anymore. Because believing her meant I was chosen, special, loved. What a fool I'd been. What an old, lonely fool. I walked through the house, room by room, and that's when I started finding things. Little things that shouldn't have been there. In the bedroom closet, behind Diane's winter coats, I found a locked metal box. I broke it open with a screwdriver, didn't even hesitate, didn't even feel guilty about destroying her property, and inside was documentation I'd never seen before. Birth certificates, social security cards, driver's licenses, all with Diane's photo but different names. Diane Marshall, Diane Foster, Diane Washington, Diane Booker. She'd been married before, multiple times, and based on the dates, those marriages overlapped with ours. Was Diane even her real name? Did she have a life somewhere else? Another husband in another city? Who thought he knew her? My hands were shaking as I dug deeper into the box. There were photos of her with other men, older men, men my age, all smiling at the camera like they'd won the lottery, like they were the luckiest men in the world. On the back of one photo, in handwriting I didn't recognize, someone had written, "Mark, deceased 2015, 340K. Another one said, "Harold, deceased 2018, 190K. Jesus Christ. I was looking at her resume. I was looking at a list of men she'd married, conned, and probably killed. Men who'd trusted her. Men like me. I sat down hard on the bedroom floor, surrounded by evidence of my wife's true profession, and I finally let myself feel it. All the rage and grief and humiliation I'd been holding back since the bank. I screamed, just opened my mouth, and screamed at the walls, at the ceiling, at God, at myself for being so stupid. How had I missed this? How had I not seen who she really was? Then I remembered something. A year ago, maybe a little more, Diane had asked me to update my life insurance policy. She said we should increase the payout. Just in case something happens, baby, I want to make sure I'm taken care of. And like an idiot, I'd done it. Doubled the policy from $250,000 to $500,000. Signed the papers, paid the higher premiums, never thought twice about it. 'Cause that's what you do. When you love someone, you protect them. You make sure they're okay if you're gone. Except Diane didn't love me. She loved my bank account. She loved my life insurance. She loved the house on Maple Street that would be hers free and clear when I died. She loved everything about me except me. And Devin? Devin was just the latest tool in her toolbox. The newest con in a career of cons. I wondered if he knew about the others. If he'd seen the photos, the list of dead husbands, the careful accounting of money stolen from men who'd made the mistake of trusting a beautiful woman with a beautiful voice. I called my brother that night. Travis lives in Colombia now, runs an auto repair shop, and has 3 grandkids he adores. We're not super close, family stuff, when we were young, hurt feelings that never quite healed. But he's still my brother. He's still blood. When he answered, his voice was cheerful. "Ray, what's going on, man? You okay?" I said, "Travis, I need you to sit down. I got something to tell you." And then I told him everything. The bank, the imposter, the box of identities, all of it. There was a long silence when I finished. Then Travis said, very quietly, "I never liked her. I know I never said it out loud, but Ray, I never trusted that woman. Something about her eyes. They were always calculating, always watching. Like she was sizing everybody up, figuring out what they were worth. I asked him why he never said anything. He sighed. Would you have listened? You were in love, man. You were happy. Who was I to tell you your happiness was built on quicksand? He was right. I wouldn't have listened. Love makes you deaf to warnings, blind to red flags, stupid in ways you can't fix until it's too late. Travis said he'd drive up the next morning, help me go through the house, help me figure out what to do next. I told him I appreciated it. Then he said something that stuck with me. Ray, you need to understand something. This wasn't your fault. Some people are born broken. They don't feel things the way normal people do. They see other human beings as resources to be exploited. You can't spot them until they decide to show themselves, and by then, it's usually too late. I wanted to believe him, but as I hung up the phone and sat alone in my violated house, surrounded by the evidence of Diane's betrayals, I couldn't shake the feeling that I should have known, that somewhere, deep down, I did know. And I just refused to see it, because seeing it would mean admitting that I was alone again, that I'd always been alone, even when I thought I wasn't. The next morning, Travis showed up at 8 a.m. with coffee and breakfast sandwiches, and we sat at my kitchen table, going through Diane's box of secrets like archaeologists excavating a cursed tomb. He kept shaking his head, muttering, "Jesus Christ," under his breath every time we found something new. The worst discoveries weren't the fake IDs or the photos of dead husbands. Those were horrifying. But they were also abstract, disconnected from my daily life. The worst discoveries were the small, intimate betrayals. Like the journal we found hidden under a loose floorboard in the closet. Diane's actual journal, written in her real handwriting, documenting her entire con. She'd been keeping notes on me from day one. Raymond responded well to religious language, used Bible verses and church talk to build trust. Raymond values loyalty and consistency. Maintain the devoted wife persona at all times. Raymond is lonely and desperate for connection. Exploit his fear of dying alone. Page after page of observations, strategies, lies. She'd studied me like a scientist studies a lab rat, documenting my behaviors, my weaknesses, my triggers. And the most chilling part? She'd been planning to kill me for at least 2 years. There were notes about different methods. Medication tampering, low risk, looks natural. Staged accident, higher risk but faster payout. Stress-induced heart attack. Push buttons about finances and mortality. She'd been trying to kill me slowly, methodically, while I sat across from her at dinner and told her about my day at the mill. Travis read through some of the journal entries, his face getting darker with each page. Finally, he slammed it shut and said, "We need to take this to the police. All of it. This is evidence of attempted murder, Ray. This isn't just fraud anymore." I knew he was right, but part of me didn't want to do it. Not because I wanted to protect Diane. I'd happily watch her rot in prison for what she'd done. But because going to the police meant making it real. It meant telling strangers about my shame, my stupidity, my failure to see the monster sleeping in my bed. It meant putting my face on the news. Local man nearly killed by wife and accomplice in elaborate identity theft scheme. It meant everyone at the mill, everyone at church, everyone in Greenville knowing that Raymond Booker was a fool who couldn't tell his wife was trying to murder him. But Travis looked at me hard and said, Pride ain't worth dying over, Ray. And this woman is dangerous. How many other men has she done this to? How many are actually dead because of her? You've got a chance to stop her, to make sure she never does this again. Don't let her walk away just because you're embarrassed. He was right. Of course he was right. So, that afternoon, we drove to the Greenville Police Department and asked to speak to a detective. The detective assigned to our case was a woman named Sarah Lindstrom, maybe 45 years old, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude that reminded me of my mama. She listened to my story without interrupting, taking notes, occasionally asking for clarification. When I finished, she sat back in her chair and said, "Mr. Booker, I want you to understand something. You're not the first person this has happened to. There's a growing trend of what we call Black Widow scams. People, usually women, but not always, who target older individuals with savings or assets, marry them or get close to them, and then systematically drain them of resources, sometimes through theft, sometimes through murder, made to look like natural causes. The FBI has a whole task force working on it. You're lucky? Most victims don't realize what's happening until it's too late." I asked her what she meant by too late. She looked at me directly and said, "Too late means dead, Mr. Booker. Most of these cases only come to light during estate disputes, after the victim has died. The fact that you're sitting here, alive, talking to me, that's rare. Your wife made a mistake. She got impatient, tried to speed up the timeline, and got caught. If she'd waited another year, kept drugging you with those blood pressure pills, let you die of what looked like natural causes, we wouldn't be having this conversation." The thought made me cold all over. Detective Lindstrom took the journal, the box of identities, all of it. She said they'd already arrested Diane and Devin at the bank, but now they'd be adding attempted murder charges. She also said they'd be investigating the deaths of Diane's previous husbands, Harold and Mark, and whoever else she'd married over the years. Exhuming bodies, if necessary. Running toxicology tests. Seeing if any of those natural deaths were actually murder. As Travis and I left the police station, I felt simultaneously relieved and hollowed out. Relieved that someone in authority was finally taking this seriously, finally treating me like a victim rather than a fool. But hollowed out because I couldn't stop thinking about those other men. Harold, Mark, the others whose names I didn't know. Men who'd believed, like me, that they'd found love in the twilight of their lives. Men who'd died thinking they were loved, never knowing they were just marks. Did they figure it out at the end? When the pills started making them sick, when the accidents started happening, did they look at their wives and finally see the truth? Or did they die believing the lie? I didn't know which was worse. Travis took me to dinner that night at Marker 32, a nice seafood place downtown. He said I needed to eat something other than gas station sandwiches, needed to be around people and noise and normal life. We got a table by the window, ordered shrimp and grits, and just sat there for a while, not talking. Finally, Travis said, "How you holding up?" I thought about it. Was I holding up? I was alive, which was more than I could say for Harold and Mark. I had my money, my house, my freedom, but I also had the knowledge that I'd spent 32 years married to a stranger, that I'd been intimate with someone who saw me as a resource, not a person, that every kiss, every I love you. Every moment of supposed tenderness had been calculated, performed, fake. How was I holding up? I don't know, I told him honestly. Travis nodded, like that was the right answer. Then he said, "You know what Mama used to say about people like Diane? She'd say some folks are born without the part that makes them human. They walk around looking like people, talking like people, but inside they're empty. They don't feel empathy or guilt or real love. They just feel hunger. And they'll do anything, lie, steal, kill, to feed that hunger. Mama said the only way to deal with people like that is to recognize them fast and get away before they can sink their teeth in." I remembered Mama saying that years ago, talking about a woman who'd scammed our church out of thousands of dollars in a fake charity scheme. At the time, I thought Mama was being harsh, judgmental. Now I understood she was being wise. Some people really are born wrong, born without conscience, and they move through the world, leaving destruction in their wake, victims who never saw them coming. I was lucky. I'd seen the truth before it killed me. But I'd still lost 32 years. I'd still given my heart to someone who didn't deserve it, and I'd never get those years back. Travis reached across the table and gripped my shoulder. "You're gonna be okay, Ray. I know it doesn't feel like it now, but you're gonna be okay. You're stronger than you think." I wanted to believe him. But that night, lying alone in my bed, the bed I'd shared with Diane for 3 decades, I didn't feel strong. I felt old and tired and stupid. I felt like a man who'd wasted the last good years of his life on a lie. And I wondered if I'd ever feel whole again. If I'd ever trust another human being. If I'd ever stop seeing her face every time I closed my eyes. Hearing her voice every time the house creaked. Feeling her betrayal every time my heart beat. I thought I had time. Turns out, time had me all along. 6 months later, I sat in a courtroom and watched my wife of 32 years become a stranger on a witness stand. Diane had gotten herself a fancy lawyer, some slick guy from Atlanta named Preston Hale, who wore suits that cost more than my monthly pension and smiled like he'd never lost a case. The charges against her were serious: attempted murder, conspiracy to commit fraud, identity theft, and they'd added 3 counts of first-degree murder after they exhumed the bodies of her previous husbands. Turns out Harold died from antifreeze poisoning, Mark from an overdose of insulin he didn't need, and a third man named Eugene. I hadn't even known about Eugene. Died from what the medical examiner now believed was suffocation, made to look like sleep apnea. My wife was a serial killer. That beautiful woman who sang in the church choir, who made meatloaf on Tuesdays and held my hand during scary movies, had killed at least 3 men and was working on killing me when she got caught. The courtroom was packed. Local news channels, curious onlookers, families of the dead men all wanting to see justice served. I sat in the front row next to Travis and Detective Lindstrom, and I tried to make myself invisible. I didn't want people looking at me, didn't want them whispering, "That's him. That's the one who was too stupid to realize his wife was a monster." Diane looked different in her prison jumpsuit, smaller somehow, older, her face bare of makeup and her hair going gray at the roots. When they brought her in, she scanned the courtroom until she found me, and for just a second, our eyes met. She smiled, a real smile, warm and familiar, the smile I'd woken up to for 32 years. Then she mouthed 3 words, I love you. I felt Travis stiffen beside me, felt him start to move like he wanted to jump the rail and strangle her right there in court. I put my hand on his arm and shook my head. Don't give her the satisfaction. Don't let her see that she still has power over us. Diane's lawyer tried every trick in the book. He painted her as a victim of circumstance, a woman who'd been abused as a child and learned to survive by whatever means necessary. He suggested that Devon had been the mastermind, that he'd manipulated poor, innocent Diane into going along with his schemes. He even tried to argue that the previous husband's deaths were coincidental, that the evidence was circumstantial, that you can't convict someone just because they'd been unlucky in love. The prosecutor, a fierce woman named Angela Morrison, who reminded me of my mama in her righteous fury, tore those arguments apart. She presented the journal, with Diane's own handwriting documenting years of calculated murder. She brought in forensic accountants who showed the money trail from dead men's accounts into Diane's control. She had expert witnesses testify about the specific methods of poisoning found in the exhumed bodies. And she had me. When they called me to the stand, I thought I'd be nervous. Thought I'd stumble over my words, or forget important details, or somehow mess it up. But when I sat in that chair and put my hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, I felt calm for the first time in months, because this was it. This was my chance to tell the world what she'd done. Angela Morrison walked me through my testimony gently, like she understood how hard this was. She asked me to describe my marriage to Diane. The good parts, the parts I'd believed were real. She asked me when I first noticed something was wrong. She asked me about the phone call from the bank, about finding Devon, about discovering the journal and the box of identities. And I told them everything, every humiliating detail, every moment of my stupidity. When I finished, there wasn't a dry eye in that courtroom except for Diane's. She just sat there at the defense table, her face blank, her hands folded, looking at me like I was a stranger she'd never met. Like those 32 years had never happened. Like I was nothing to her at all. Maybe I never had been. Preston Hale tried to discredit me during cross-examination. He suggested I'd been a negligent husband, that my long hours at the mill had driven Diane into Devon's arms. He implied that I was exaggerating the danger I'd been in, that maybe Diane had just wanted a divorce and didn't know how to ask for one. He even had the audacity to suggest that I'd been abusive, that Diane had been planning to leave me and take what she felt she was owed. After years of suffering, I just looked at him and said, if she wanted a divorce, she could have had one. I would have given her half of everything and wished her well. She didn't need to kill me. She chose to. The turning point in the trial came when they put Devon on the stand. See, Devon had made a deal with the prosecution, full immunity, in exchange for testimony against Diane. He was the one who could prove that Diane had been the mastermind, not him. That this was her pattern, her system, and he was just the latest in a long line of accomplices she'd used and discarded. Devon looked different, too. Thinner, paler, like prison wasn't agreeing with him. When Angela Morrison asked him to describe his relationship with Diane, he spoke in a flat, emotionless voice. I met her at a bar in Spartanburg 2 years ago. She told me about this old man she was married to. Said he had money put away and wasn't smart enough to protect it. She said if I helped her, We could split everything. She'd done it before, she said. Multiple times. Had it down to a science. Angela asked, "And did she tell you what happened to her previous husbands?" Devon nodded. "She said they died. Natural causes, she called it. But she laughed when she said it, like it was a joke. Like she was proud of what she'd done." Diane's lawyer objected, saying Devon was an unreliable witness, a convicted felon trying to save himself. But the damage was done. The jury had heard it. Heard from Devon's own mouth that Diane had bragged about killing men and getting away with it. That I was just supposed to be the next name on a long list of victims. When it was Diane's turn to testify, I almost couldn't watch. Almost got up and walked out because I didn't think I could bear to hear her try to explain away what she'd done. But I stayed. I owed it to Harold and Mark and Eugene, the men who couldn't be there to face her. Preston Hale led her through a carefully crafted story. Childhood abuse, a father who'd beaten her, and a mother who'd looked away, years of being told she was worthless, learning that the only thing she had of value was her body and her ability to make men believe her. She cried, real tears streaming down her face, as she described a life of desperation and survival. She admitted that she'd made mistakes, that she'd gotten involved with bad people like Devon, but she swore she'd never killed anyone. The deaths of her previous husbands were tragic coincidences. The plot to steal from me was Devon's idea, and she'd been too scared to refuse. She looked directly at the jury and said, "I loved Raymond. I still love him. I know he doesn't believe me, but it's true. I made bad choices. I'm not a monster." Angela Morrison's cross-examination was brutal. She walked Diane through every entry in her journal, making her read her own words aloud. Raymond responded well to religious language, used Bible verses and church talk to build trust. When Diane tried to claim she didn't remember writing that, Angela produced handwriting analysis, proving it was hers. She showed Diane photos of Harold, Mark, and Eugene, showed her pictures of their graves, and asked, "Did you love them too? When you poisoned Harold's coffee? When you injected Mark with insulin? When you held a pillow over Eugene's face until he stopped breathing? Did you love them too?" Diane broke down completely, sobbing so hard she couldn't speak. But before they could end the cross-examination, Angela asked one final question. "Mrs. Booker, how many men have you killed?" And Diane, her face streaked with tears, her voice barely a whisper, said, "I don't know. I stopped counting at 12. The courtroom exploded. Reporters rushing to their phones, family members crying out in shock, the judge hammering his gavel and demanding order. 12, not 3, not 4. 12 men dead by her hand, their deaths dismissed as natural causes, or accidents, or bad luck. 12 families who'd mourned, loved ones never knowing they'd been murdered. 12 lives ended so Diane could fund whatever lifestyle she wanted. I sat there in stunned silence as security guards took Diane back to her holding cell, her lawyer shouting that her statement should be stricken, that she'd been coerced, that she was emotionally compromised. But it didn't matter. The jury had heard her. We'd all heard her. Travis gripped my hand so tight it hurt, and I realized I was shaking, my whole body trembling like I was freezing to death in that overheated courtroom. Detective Lindstrom leaned over and said quietly, "We'll find them, all 12. We'll identify them, Notify their families. Make sure they get justice. I promise you that." I nodded but couldn't speak. Couldn't process what I'd just heard. 12 men. 12 men like me who'd thought they'd found love and found death instead. And I'd almost been number 13. The trial lasted 3 more days, but the verdict was never in doubt. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before returning with guilty on all counts. When the judge asked if she had anything to say before sentencing, Diane stood up slowly. She looked at the families of her victims, seated throughout the courtroom. She looked at the jury. Then she looked at me, and she said, "I'm sorry you all think I'm a monster, but I'm not. I'm just a woman who learned early that men only value you for what you can give them. So I decided to take what I could before they could take from me. Raymond, Harold, Mark, all the others. They weren't innocents. They wanted something from me, too. Company, sex, someone to take care of them in their old age. They were using me just like I was using them. The only difference is, I was better at it." Then she smiled that beautiful smile and sat down. The judge sentenced her to life in prison without possibility of parole. Devin got 15 years for his role in the conspiracy. And I walked out of that courtroom into the bright South Carolina sunshine. A free man. Legally, at least. But freedom doesn't mean whole. And being alive doesn't mean living. After the trial, I sold the house on Maple Street. Couldn't live there anymore. Couldn't sleep in that bed, or cook in that kitchen, or sit in that living room where Diane had performed the role of loving wife for 32 years. Every corner held a memory that had turned poisonous. Every photo on the wall was a lie. Every piece of furniture was contaminated by her presence. Travis helped me pack up my things. The items I wanted to keep. The pieces of my life that predated Diane, and therefore still felt real. My daddy's tools, Mama's recipe box, photos of me and Travis as kids playing in the creek behind our childhood home in Charleston. Everything else, all the furniture, the decorations, the things Diane had chosen or that we'd supposedly chosen together, I donated or threw away. I didn't want money for any of it. I just wanted it gone, out of my life, erased like she'd tried to erase me. I moved into a small apartment in downtown Greenville, a one-bedroom place in a building full of young professionals and college students. I was the oldest tenant by at least 30 years, and some nights I'd hear music and laughter from neighboring apartments and feel like an alien who'd landed on a planet where joy still existed. I couldn't remember what joy felt like anymore. Couldn't remember the last time I'd laughed or felt at peace or looked forward to tomorrow. I was alive, but I wasn't living. I was just existing, going through motions, waiting for something I couldn't name. The mill gave me their condolences when the trial ended, told me I could take as much time off as I needed. But I went back to work after a week because I didn't know what else to do with myself. The routine was comforting. Wake up at 5 a.m., make coffee, drive to the mill, clock in at 6, operate the same machines I'd operated for 47 years. My hands knew to work without my brain having to engage. I could lose myself in the rhythm of it, the noise and heat and mechanical predictability. My coworkers were kind but awkward. They didn't know what to say to a man whose wife had tried to kill him. How do you make small talk with someone who's been through that? So mostly they just nodded at me, gave me space, and I was grateful for it. The only person who treated me normally was Jerome Washington, my supervisor for the last 20 years. Jerome was 68, a big man with gentle eyes who'd raised 6 kids on a mill worker's salary and somehow still believed in human goodness. One day during our lunch break, Jerome sat down across from me in the break room and said, "Ray, I'm going to tell you something my daddy told me when I was young. He said there's 2 ways to handle betrayal. You can let it turn you hard, make you suspicious and angry and closed off to the world. Or you can let it break you open, make you more compassionate, because you know what suffering feels like. Either way, you're changed. But you get to choose which direction you go." I asked him which way his daddy went. Jerome smiled sadly. Hard. He got betrayed by a business partner, lost everything, and spent the rest of his life trusting nobody. Died alone in a VA hospital, with none of his kids speaking to him because he'd pushed everyone away. I decided I wasn't going to do that. I was going to stay soft, even when the world tried to make me hard. I didn't know if I could do that. Stay soft. Right now, I felt like stone, cold, heavy, impenetrable. But I appreciated that Jerome thought it was possible. 3 months after the trial, I got a letter. It was forwarded to me from the house on Maple Street. Addressed in handwriting I recognized immediately. Diane's handwriting. My first instinct was to throw it away unopened. I didn't want her words in my head, didn't want to hear her excuses or justifications or whatever manipulative nonsense she wanted to spew. But curiosity got the better of me. I sat at my small dining table in my small apartment, staring at that envelope for 10 minutes before I finally opened it. The letter was 3 pages long, written on prison stationery. It started, "Dear Raymond, I know you probably hate me. I know you think I'm a monster. Maybe I am. But I need you to understand something. Everything I told you in court was a lie. My lawyer made me say those things. The truth is more complicated." I almost stopped reading right there. More lies, more manipulation. But I kept going. She wrote about her childhood. Real details this time. She claimed not the manufactured abuse story her lawyer had crafted. She said she'd grown up poor in rural Alabama, the youngest of 6 kids, watching her mama work herself to death while her daddy drank away whatever money they had. She said she'd learned early that beauty was currency, that men would give her things if she was pretty enough, sweet enough, compliant enough, and she'd gotten good at it. By the time I was 25, I'd married 3 men and buried 2 of them, she wrote. Not because I wanted to kill them, because they were old and I was patient. I'd marry men with money and bad health, wait for nature to take its course, collect the insurance, and move on. It wasn't murder. It was just good planning. But then something changed, she wrote. She got addicted to the game, started marrying younger men, healthier men, men who weren't going to die on their own schedule. So she helped them along. I know you'll never believe this, her letter continued, but I really did love you, Raymond, at least as much as I'm capable of loving anyone. You were kind. You were stable. You made me feel safe. And for a while, I thought maybe I could just stay with you, grow old for real, let you die naturally someday. But then I saw how much money you had saved, saw that retirement account, that life insurance policy, and the hunger came back, the need. It's like an addiction, Raymond. I'd try to stop, try to just be happy with what I had, but I couldn't. The hunger was always there. She described planning my death in detail. Not to hurt me, she claimed, but because she wanted me to understand how close it had been. The medication tampering, the staged scenarios that were supposed to look like accidents, the increasing dosages, the careful timeline. She said Devon had been her biggest mistake. She'd gotten greedy, tried to speed things up, and he'd gotten sloppy. If I'd just been patient, she wrote, you'd be dead now, and I'd be living in your house spending your money. The fact that you're alive to read this letter is pure luck. So, congratulations on your luck, Raymond. Not many men survived me. The letter ended with, I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't expect it and don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know the truth. All of it. And I wanted to tell you one more thing. If there's a hell, I'll probably go there when I die. But Raymond, in some ways, I'm already there. Because the one real thing in my entire life was you. And I destroyed it for money that I'll never get to spend. So who really lost? I'll let you decide. Love always, Diane. I sat there for a long time after reading that letter. Then I did something I didn't expect. I laughed. Not a happy laugh. A bitter, broken laugh that turned into something that might have been crying if I'd had any tears left. Love always. After everything, she signed it, Love always. Like that meant something. Like love was a word that could still hold weight coming from someone who'd planned your murder. I took the letter and walked to my kitchen. I turned on the gas stove, held the pages over the flame, and watched them burn. Watched Diane's handwriting curl and blacken, and turn to ash. When there was nothing left but ashes in my sink, I washed them down the drain and went to bed. I didn't think about the letter again, didn't let her words dig into my brain and make a home there. She wanted me to understand her. I didn't care about understanding her. I cared about surviving her. And I had. That had to be enough, but that night I had a dream. I was back in our bedroom, the real bedroom, in the house on Maple Street. And Diane was there, young and beautiful like she'd been when we met. She was singing His Eye is on the Sparrow, her voice pure and clear. And in the dream, I knew she was dangerous. Knew she was going to kill me. But I couldn't move, couldn't run, couldn't scream. I could only stand there and listen to her sing. And when she finished, she looked at me and said, Do you understand now? I wasn't evil. I was just hungry, and you were food. Then I woke up, gasping for air, my heart racing like I'd been running for my life, which I realized I had been. For 32 years, I'd been running, and didn't even know it. Running from a predator who wore my wife's face, and I'd only survived because she'd gotten impatient. Because she'd made one mistake. One single mistake in a career of perfect murders. That's what separated me from Harold and Mark and Eugene and the 9 others whose names I'd never know. Not strength, not wisdom, just luck. And that knowledge that I was alive because of random chance, not because I'd been smart or vigilant or brave, that was almost harder to live with than the betrayal itself. A year after the trial, I was still working at the mill, still living in my small apartment, still going through the motions of existence without really feeling alive. I'd lost weight down to 165 pounds from my usual 190 because I kept forgetting to eat. Food didn't taste like anything anymore. Everything was gray. Gray skies, gray walls, gray days bleeding into gray nights. Travis called me every week, checking in, making sure I was okay. I always told him I was fine. He always knew I was lying. One Saturday morning, in late March, Travis showed up at my apartment unannounced. He had his grandson with him, a 7-year-old kid named Marcus, named after my old friend from the mill who died of a heart attack, the one that started all this. Marcus had a basketball under his arm and a smile that could light up a room. Travis said, "We're going to the park. You're coming with us. This isn't a request, Ray. This is an intervention." I tried to refuse, said I had things to do. Travis looked around my sparse apartment, bare walls, minimal furniture, nothing personal or warm or lived in, and said, "Yeah, I can see how busy you are. Get your shoes. We're leaving." So I got my shoes, and we went to the park. Marcus was one of those kids who doesn't know how to be quiet or still. He ran around that park like his feet were on fire, shooting baskets, chasing birds, talking nonstop about his teacher and his friends and the video game he was saving up to buy. And slowly, despite myself, I started to feel something. Not happiness exactly, but a lightness. A brief break in the gray. When Marcus missed a shot, I found myself saying, "Here, let me show you something." And before I knew it, I was teaching him how to shoot a layup, the way my daddy had taught me 50 years ago. Marcus listened seriously, tried the shot, made it, and whooped with joy. "Did you see that, Grandpa? Did you see? Mr. Ray is a good teacher." Travis was sitting on a bench watching us, and when I looked over, he had tears running down his face. I went over and sat next to him. "You okay?" I asked. He nodded. "I just haven't seen you smile in over a year. Thought maybe you'd forgotten how." I hadn't realized I was smiling, but I was. For the first time since that phone call from the bank, I felt something like peace. It didn't last long. By that evening, the gray was back, the weight pressing down on my chest. But for a couple of hours that afternoon, playing basketball with a 7-year-old kid in a public park, I'd felt almost human again. And that gave me hope. Maybe not a lot, but enough to keep going another day. Around that same time, I started attending a support group for victims of domestic violence and emotional abuse. My therapist, I'd finally agreed to see a therapist after Travis basically dragged me to one, suggested it might help to talk to other people who'd been through similar experiences. I was skeptical. My situation was unique, right? How many people had been married to serial killers who looked like church ladies? But the therapist insisted, so I went. The group met every Thursday evening in the basement of a community center downtown. 15 or 20 people, mostly women but a few men, all sitting in a circle on folding chairs, sharing their stories. The first night I went, I just listened. Heard a woman named Janet talk about her ex-husband, who'd beaten her for years, convinced her she was worthless, isolated her from family and friends. Heard a man named Robert describe how his wife had taken out credit cards in his name, run up hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, then disappeared with her boyfriend to another state. Heard story after story of betrayal, manipulation, abuse. And I realized something. My situation wasn't unique. The details were different, sure. Most people's spouses weren't literal murderers. But the core of it, the betrayal of trust, the realization that the person you loved most in the world was using you, the shame of not seeing it sooner, that was universal. That was human. When it was my turn to share, I kept it simple. My name is Raymond. My wife tried to kill me for my retirement money. She'd killed at least 12 men before me. I survived because she got impatient and made a mistake. Now she's in prison, and I'm trying to figure out how to be a person again. There was a long silence. Then Janet, the woman who'd been beaten by her ex-husband, reached over and squeezed my hand. She said, "You are a person, Raymond. You've always been a person. She just tried to make you forget that." And somehow, that simple statement, that validation from a stranger, meant more to me than all the therapy sessions and all the conversations with Travis combined. Because Janet understood. They all understood. We were survivors of different kinds of evil, but we were survivors together. I started going to that group every Thursday. Started sharing more of my story. Started listening to other stories with real attention and empathy. Started to remember what it felt like to connect with other human beings without fear or suspicion. And slowly, very slowly, I started to rebuild myself. Not the person I'd been before Diane. That person was gone, dead as surely as Harold and Mark and Eugene. But a new person, someone harder, but also kinder. Someone who'd seen the worst of humanity, but still believed in the possibility of good. Someone who'd been broken open, like Jerome said, and was learning to live with the cracks. 6 months after I started attending the group, a new woman joined. Her name was Patricia. Not Patricia Simmons from the bank. Different Patricia. And she was in her late 60s, small and fierce, with silver hair cut short. Her husband had died 2 years earlier, supposedly of a heart attack. But after his death, she'd discovered he'd been embezzling from his employer for decades. Left her with nothing but debt and shame. She said, "I thought I knew him. 43 years of marriage, and I didn't know the most important thing about him, that he was a thief and a liar." How do you recover from that? How do you ever trust yourself again? I heard myself answer, before I'd consciously decided to speak. You don't recover. You rebuild. And you don't trust yourself. You just keep moving forward and hope you're making better choices than you did before. That's all any of us can do. Patricia looked at me like I'd just handed her a life preserver. After the meeting, she came up to me and said, "Thank you." That's the first thing anyone said that actually made sense. We started talking regularly. Not dating, nothing romantic, just two people who'd been through hell comparing notes on how to survive. We'd meet for coffee on Saturday mornings, walk around Cleveland, park, talk about our dead spouses and our broken lives, and our attempts to build something new from the wreckage. Patricia had a way of cutting through nonsense that reminded me of my mama. One day, I was complaining about how stupid I'd been, how I should have seen the signs, and she cut me off mid-sentence. "Raymond, stop it. You weren't stupid. You were trusting. There's a difference. Stupid is when you ignore red flags because you don't care. Trusting is when you don't see red flags because you believe in people. Your wife was a predator. Predators are experts at hiding what they really are. You didn't fail to see her. She succeeded at deceiving you. Give yourself some grace." I started to cry right there on the park bench. Patricia just handed me a tissue and sat quietly until I was done. Then she said, "Feel better?" I nodded. "Good. Now buy me a donut. I've earned it for putting up with your self-pity." And just like that, she made me laugh. Made me feel like maybe, eventually, I could be okay. 2 years after the trial, I got a call from Detective Sarah Lindstrom. She said they'd identified 8 more victims. Men who'd died in circumstances similar to Harold, Mark, and Eugene. Men who'd been married to women who looked suspiciously like Diane, though she'd used different names and different hair colors and different stories. The FBI had gotten involved, creating a task force to track her movements over the past 30 years. They'd found marriage certificates, death certificates, insurance claims, bank records, a trail of bodies and money stretching across 4 states. We're up to 21 confirmed victims, Detective Lindstrom told me, and we're still finding more. Mr. Booker, your wife might be one of the most prolific serial killers in American history. And nobody knew, because she was patient. Because she chose vulnerable men, widowers, divorced men, lonely men who didn't have close family watching out for them. Men who were so grateful to find love that they didn't ask questions. I asked if they'd told the families. She said yes. They were notifying everyone they could find. Sons and daughters and siblings of men who'd thought their fathers or brothers had died of natural causes. People who were now learning their loved ones had been murdered. How are they taking it? I asked. Detective Lindstrom was quiet for a moment. Then she said, about how you'd expect. Grief, rage, guilt for not protecting someone they loved. Same things you felt, Mr. Booker. You're not alone in this. You're part of a very large club that nobody wanted to join. After that call, I did something I'd been avoiding for 2 years. I wrote letters to the families of Diane's victims. 21 letters, 1 for each man she'd killed. I introduced myself, explained that I'd been married to the same woman, that I'd almost been number 22. I told them I understood their pain, their rage, their confusion. I told them it wasn't their fault for not seeing what she was. I told them their loved ones had deserved better, deserved justice, deserved to be remembered as more than just victims in a serial killer's trail of destruction. And I included my phone number and email, offering to talk if they ever wanted to hear from someone who understood. I mailed all 21 letters on the same day, then went home and waited. Some families never responded. Maybe they didn't want to relive the trauma. Maybe they blamed me by association. Maybe they just needed to move on. But 7 families reached out. I talked to the daughter of Harold, the one Diane had poisoned with antifreeze. She said, my dad was so happy when he met her. He'd been alone for 5 years after Mom died, and Diane made him feel young again. He trusted her completely, and she killed him for $340,000. That's what his life was worth to her. $340,000. I told her that money hadn't bought Diane anything but a life sentence in prison. That she'd lost everything too. Her freedom, her future, whatever humanity she might have had left. The daughter said, good. I hope she rots in there. I hope she lives a long time. Long enough to really understand what she took from all of us. I talked to the brother of Mark, the one Diane had killed with insulin. He said something that stuck with me. I keep thinking about the last time I saw Mark. It was Thanksgiving, and he brought Diane to my house. She helped my wife cook, laughed at my jokes, seemed like a wonderful person, and the whole time she was planning his murder. How do you reconcile that? How do you accept that evil can look so normal? I didn't have an answer for him. I still don't. That's the thing about people like Diane. They shatter your assumptions about human nature. They make you question everything you thought you knew about good and evil, love and hate, trust and betrayal. They make the world feel unsafe in a way it never felt before. But talking to those families helped me in a weird way. It helped me see that I wasn't alone, that my experience was part of a larger pattern, that Diane's evil had touched dozens of lives, and we were all survivors of the same storm. And more than that, it helped me find purpose again. Because I realized something. I'd been given a gift that those 21 men didn't get. I'd been given more time, more years, more chances to live, to love, to make a difference. And I'd been wasting it by hiding in my apartment, going through the motions, treating survival as if it were the same as living. It wasn't. Survival was just not dying. Living was something else entirely. I quit my job at the mill. After 49 years, I'd picked up 2 more years after the trial, working on autopilot. I finally retired for real. My boss asked if I was sure, reminded me that the mill was my life. I said, "No, sir. The mill was my work. My life is something I need to go figure out." I used some of my retirement money to go back to school. 73 years old, and I enrolled in community college to get a degree in social work. People thought I was crazy. Travis said, "Ray, you're too old for college. You're supposed to be relaxing, playing golf, enjoying your golden years." I said, "I don't play golf, and my golden years got stolen by a woman who wanted my bank account. I'm not wasting whatever time I have left. I'm going to use it for something that matters." So I became a student again. Sat in classrooms with kids young enough to be my grandchildren, learning about psychology and trauma and how to help people rebuild their lives after tragedy. And you know what? I was good at it because I understood trauma. I understood betrayal. I understood what it felt like to have your entire life revealed as a lie. I understood survivors because I was one. 2 years later, at age 75, I got my degree. Walked across that stage in my cap and gown with Travis and Marcus and Patricia cheering in the audience, and I felt something I hadn't felt in 5 years. Pride. Not pride in surviving. That was luck, not accomplishment. But pride in rebuilding. In choosing to become something new rather than staying broken. In taking my pain and turning it into purpose. I started volunteering at the same community center where I'd attended the support group. Started facilitating groups for other survivors of domestic violence and manipulation. Started sharing my story, not for sympathy, but as proof that you could survive the unsurvivable. That you could be broken open and still find a way to put yourself back together, even if the pieces didn't fit quite the same way they had before. One evening, after a group session, a young man named Daniel came up to me. He was maybe 30 years old, and his girlfriend had nearly killed him in a staged car accident before he discovered she'd taken out a life insurance policy on him. He said, "Mr. Booker, how do you do it? How do you trust anyone again after what happened to you?" I thought about it for a long time. Then I said, "I don't trust everyone. I trust carefully. I watch for red flags. I listen to my gut when something feels wrong. But Daniel, I don't let her win by becoming like her. I don't let her turn me into someone who sees everyone as a potential threat. Because that's not living. That's just surviving in a different kind of prison." Daniel nodded slowly. Then he said, "Did you ever forgive her?" I'd been asked that question before, by therapists, by Patricia, by other survivors. My answer was always the same. No, I don't forgive her for what she did. But I've forgiven myself for not seeing it sooner. And I've made peace with the fact that evil exists, and sometimes we can't protect ourselves from it. That's not the same as forgiving her, but it's enough to let me sleep at night. And it was true. I did sleep now. Most nights, anyway. The nightmares had faded. The constant anxiety had lessened. I still thought about Diane sometimes. About the 32 years she stole from me. The life we could have had if she'd been a different person. But I didn't let those thoughts consume me anymore. Because I'd learned something important. You can't get back stolen time. You can only make something meaningful with the time you have left. I'm 77 years old now. It's been 6 years since that phone call from the bank. 6 years since my life cracked open and forced me to become someone new. Diane is still in prison. I heard through Detective Lindstrom that she's been diagnosed with cancer, liver cancer, advanced, terminal. They give her maybe a year. Part of me, a small petty part, thinks that's justice. That God or karma or the universe decided she needed to die the way she made so many other people die. Slowly, painfully, with time to think about what she'd done. But mostly I feel nothing about it. Diane stopped being real to me a long time ago. She's just a character in a story now. A cautionary tale, I tell, to people who need to hear it. The woman I thought I loved never existed. And the woman who actually existed, she was a stranger wearing a familiar face. You can't mourn someone who was never real. All you can do is mourn the version of yourself that believed in the illusion. I've done my mourning. I'm done with grief. I still volunteer at the community center 3 times a week. Still facilitate support groups. Still share my story. Still help people understand that survival is possible, even when it doesn't feel like it. Last month I got a letter from the daughter of Eugene, the 3rd man whose body they'd exhumed, the one Diane had suffocated. The daughter's name is Claire, and she wanted to thank me for reaching out years ago when she'd first learned the truth about her father's death. She wrote, "You helped me understand that Dad's murder wasn't my fault for not protecting him. That predators like your ex-wife are experts at deception. That I couldn't have saved him because I didn't know he needed saving. That's given me peace I didn't think was possible. Thank you for turning your trauma into help for others. Thank you for not letting her destroy you." I cried when I read that letter. Not sad tears, grateful tears. Because Claire was right. Diane didn't destroy me. She tried. God knows she tried. But I'm still here, still standing, still finding reasons to wake up in the morning and meaning in the wreckage she left behind. If that's not victory, I don't know what is. Patricia and I are still friends, still meet for coffee on Saturday mornings, still walk around Cleveland Park talking about life and loss, and the strange journey of healing. She's become one of my closest friends, someone who understands without needing explanation, someone who's walked a similar path and knows the terrain. She tells me I'm too serious sometimes, that I need to laugh more, enjoy life more. She's probably right. I'm working on it. Travis calls me every week still, checking in even though he doesn't need to anymore. Last month, he invited me to Marcus's 10th birthday party. I went and I watched that kid blow out his candles, surrounded by family who loved him, protected him, would never let anyone hurt him the way Diane hurt me. And I thought about the cycle of protection and care, how we pass safety down through generations, how Marcus would grow up knowing he was valued, not for what he could give someone, but just for being who he was, and how that knowledge would protect him from predators like Diane. Not perfectly, because nothing protects perfectly, but enough. Enough to give him a fighting chance. I think about Mama sometimes, about what she'd say if she were still alive to see what happened to me. I think she'd be proud that I didn't let it destroy me, that I took Jerome's advice and let the betrayal break me open rather than make me hard, that I found a way to use my pain to help others. Mama always said the measure of a person isn't what happens to them, but how they respond to what happens to them. By that measure, I like to think I'm a good person. Not perfect. I still have days where the weight of it all presses down, and I wonder what the point is. Days where I question if I'll ever really be whole again, or if I'm just pretending. But those days are fewer now. And the good days, the days where I help someone understand they're not alone, where I see hope return to someone's eyes, where I feel connected to other humans in a real, honest way, those days are worth everything. I don't tell anyone this usually, but I keep a list. 22 names written in a journal I keep by my bed. The 21 men Diane killed, and my own name at the bottom. I read that list every morning when I wake up, and I say a little prayer for each person, not because I'm particularly religious anymore, but because I want to remember them, want to make sure they're not just statistics in an FBI report or headlines in old newspapers. They were people, fathers, brothers, husbands, friends. They had lives that mattered, dreams that died with them. And the only reason I'm not on a list like that is luck. Random, arbitrary luck. So I owe it to them, to Harold and Mark and Eugene and all the others, to make my survival mean something, to live the life they didn't get to live, to find the peace they were denied. Last week I got a call from a lawyer. He said Diane wanted to see me, that she's dying and wants to apologize in person before she goes. I said no. The lawyer tried to convince me, said it might give me closure, help me heal, let me move on. I told him I've already moved on, that I don't need Diane's apology, because nothing she says will change what happened. She killed 21 people. She tried to kill me. She destroyed families, shattered lives, left a trail of grief across multiple states, spanning 3 decades. An apology from her deathbed doesn't fix any of that. It just makes her feel better in her final days. And I'm not interested in making Diane feel better. I'm interested in living my life. So no, I won't visit her in prison. Won't give her the satisfaction of seeing my face one more time. Won't let her have any more of my time or energy or peace. She's already taken enough. She doesn't get another damn thing. That conversation with the lawyer made me realize something. I've forgiven myself. Not for being stupid. I wasn't stupid. But for being human. For wanting love and companionship and believing I'd found it. For trusting someone who weaponized that trust. For surviving when others didn't. I've forgiven myself for all of it. And that's enough. That's everything. I'm sitting on my balcony right now as I finish telling you this story. It's early evening. The sun is setting over Greenville, painting the sky those same oranges and purples that used to make me think the world was on fire. But now, they just look beautiful. Just look like promise. I'm drinking coffee. Still take it the same way. 2 sugars and a splash of cream. Some habits don't change. And I'm thinking about tomorrow. About the support group I'm facilitating. About the coffee date with Patricia. About the life I'm building one small choice at a time. Is it the life I imagined when I was young? No. Is it the life I thought I'd have when I married Diane? Hell no. But it's my life. Real, honest, hard-won. And nobody can take it from me because I'm not giving anyone that power ever again. If you've made it this far in my story, if you've stayed with me through all the darkness and pain and slow climb back to light, then I want you to know something. Whatever you're going through, whatever betrayal or trauma or loss has broken you open, you can survive it. You can rebuild. It won't be easy. Some days it'll feel impossible, but you can do it. I'm living proof that you can lose everything and still find reasons to keep going. Still find meaning in the wreckage. Still become someone new, someone stronger, someone better than you were before the world tried to destroy you. I don't think that's you. That was Diane's final gift to me. Not the money she tried to steal or the years she wasted, but the phone call from Patricia Simmons. The bank teller who trusted her instincts, who saw something wrong and acted on it, who saved my life without even knowing me. I sent Patricia Simmons flowers every year on the anniversary of that day. Included a note thanking her for her vigilance, her courage, her unwillingness to ignore her gut feeling. She wrote back once, said she was just doing her job. But she wasn't. She was doing more than her job. She was paying attention to the small details that most people miss. She was trusting herself when it would have been easier to just process the transaction and move on. She was being the kind of human being we all should be. Alert, compassionate, willing to act when something feels wrong. Patricia Simmons saved my life. And I've spent the last 6 years trying to pay that forward, trying to be for other people what she was for me. Someone who sees, someone who cares, someone who acts. That's what this all comes down to in the end. We save each other. That's how we survive predators like Diane. Not by being perfect or never making mistakes or always seeing danger coming, but by looking out for each other, by trusting our instincts, by creating communities where people aren't isolated and vulnerable to predators who hunt alone. I survived because one bank teller paid attention. 21 men died because nobody was paying attention to them. That's the difference. That's everything. So here's what I want you to take from my story. Pay attention to the people you love, to the strangers around you, to the small details that feel wrong, even if you can't explain why. Trust your instincts. If something feels off, it probably is. And don't let shame or embarrassment or fear of being wrong keep you from speaking up, asking questions, protecting yourself and others. Nobody's coming to save you. You have to save yourself. And if you're lucky, if you're blessed, someone like Patricia Simmons will be paying attention at the right moment and give you the chance to survive. I didn't tell you this story to make you afraid of people or suspicious of love or convinced that everyone's a predator. Most people are good. Most people are honest. Most people won't try to kill you for your retirement account. But some will. And you need to know that. Need to be prepared for the possibility that the person sleeping next to you, singing in the church choir, making you coffee in the morning, that person might not be who they claim to be. Might be wearing a mask so perfect you can't see the monster underneath until it's too late. I'm not saying don't trust anyone. I'm saying trust carefully. Love openly, but with your eyes open. And never, ever ignore your gut when it's screaming that something's wrong. My name is Raymond Arthur Booker. I'm 77 years old. I was married for 32 years to a serial killer who almost made me victim number 22. But I'm still here, still breathing, still finding joy in small moments and meaning in helping others in peace, in the knowledge that I didn't let her win. I survived. And if I can survive what Diane did to me, you can survive whatever you're facing. I promise you that. The sun is setting, my coffee's getting cold, and I've got a life to live. A real life, an honest life, a life that's mine and nobody else's. That's all any of us can ask for in the end, a chance to live our own lives on our own terms. I got that chance. I'm not wasting it, and neither should you. If you're watching from somewhere in the world where you needed to hear this story, drop a comment below. Tell me where you are. Tell me you're still fighting. Tell me you're going to survive whatever's trying to destroy you, because you will. I believe that. I have to believe that. It's the only way forward. Peace to you all. And thank you for listening to an old man's story. Maybe it'll save someone's life someday. If it does, then everything. All the pain, all the betrayal, all the years of rebuilding will have been worth it. That's my prayer. That's my hope. That's my peace.